Just before that, let's talk about you for a moment. I really hope that you're holding on well wherever you are, whatever it is you're going through today. I hope that you are holding on well. Remember that life is, they say, 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react. So I really want you to react in the very best way possible, always, because we, of course, care about you. Okay? So don't forget 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react. But hey, before we get started, don't enjoy this alone, okay? If you are listening to us and you think that someone else needs this, absolutely share this with somebody. If they're within radio coverage, tell them to tune in right now to Radio Nigeria, wherever they are in the country. And if they can't do that, they can just head over to smegrowth.ng. That is SMEGROWTH.ng to watch live and even listen live over the internet. Or you can just head over to YouTube at Nigerian Bankers Committee. So we have all of the options available for you: radio, internet, we are there. So without taking much of your time, let's get right into today's conversation. And today we're building on last week's conversation about the foreign exchange rate. And I tell you, last week was an eye opener. And by the way, you can find that episode on YouTube right after the show. Okay, don't go just yet. Let's talk about today's conversation. By the way, last week we learned so much about the foreign exchange market, the rate, how the naira is determined against the dollar, the factors responsible, and so much more. But today we shift focus and we shift gears to talk about that decision that took our naira to where it is right now. Today on the show, we're talking about how to understand devaluation, the policy of the CBN. Some call it the floating of the naira, devaluation, depreciation. Not to worry. Today we'll be getting all of the answers to the questions on your mind about devaluation, the floating of the naira, essentially why the naira went from where it was to where it is right now, the factors that contributed to that, how the CBN and the banks are working to ensure that that works for you and I. So let's get started and introduce our panelists. We have joining us on the show this evening, yet again, from the nation's capital, Abuja, Sadiq Ahmed, who's the chief dealer financial markets at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Sadiq was with us last week and he makes a return. So let's give him a warm Bankers Committee FLPU welcome. Sadiq, it's great to have you yet again. And right here in our Lagos studio, we have Mr. Akintoye Babalola, who's treasurer of Fidelity Bank. We have Hakim Mohammed, ED Global Markets and International Banking Division, FSDH Merchant Bank, and Ronald Uwaeze Apu, Head Global Market Treasury, Coronation Bank. Gentlemen, good evening and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I'm with the men in black, literally, in the studio today. And as I said earlier on, you wouldn't see this on any other show, bringing together the big players, the leading banks, and the regulator all together in one room to have this conversation. So, gentlemen, thank you for making time out of your busy schedule to join us on the show. We also have joining us Mr. Odusanya Bankole, who is a chief dealer at Polaris Bank. So together we'll be having this conversation. So, gentlemen, let's get right into it. Without taking too much of time, I'd like us to not take things for granted, right? We just assume that a lot of people know what devaluation means, what the floating of the naira means. But if there is a quick explainer as to what floating of the naira is all about, what this devaluation is, if we could just take one sentence in the simplest way possible, gentlemen, and I'll begin with Ronald to my extreme right. What is devaluation of a naira about? Floating of the naira. What is this exactly?
Okay, thank you, Kayode. So let me start with devaluation.
Right.
So the definition of devaluation is the reduction or the underestimation of the worth or value of something. In this case, is the naira. So let me now take it to the floating of the naira. Now, floating the naira means you are letting the naira value to be determined by the economic activity of the country.
Right.
The demand and supply activity within the country determines the value. So in effect, the currency devalues when the economic activity of that country is suboptimal. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, probably you will now get to the question as to why the CBN decided to float the Naira. Okay, so let me stop here with the explanation.
Fantastic.
And the question you asked.
Fantastic. So, same question to you, Bankole. For those listening, and they've heard this time and again, devaluation of the Naira, depreciation, floating of the currency. They're not seeing any currency floating. They just hear all these big terms being thrown at them. So, Bankole, quick explain, and in the simplest form, what is this really?
Currency against foreign currency. Sometimes we'll call it benchmark currency, it could be the dollar, pounds, or euro. Because speaking in our own environment, bidding against dollar, pounds, or euro, sometimes the Chinese yuan. So basically, the first devaluation we had in Nigeria was 40 years ago.
Oh, wait a minute. We've had this before.
Oh yes, it was started. It was 1 to 1, $1 to $1. First one went to $1 to $4.
So that's where we started from.
If you that story, but the first devaluation was 40 years ago, and then we are today at 1005. You can see how far we've gone away from the dollar. There are advantages and disadvantages to devaluation. Speak to that.
Oh, definitely.
The value of your currency against the benchmark or international currency exchange terms.
Fantastic. And we'll get to the reasons for that. But I love the way you put it, particularly with the historical context, so people understand that this is not the first time out. But I can tell you, I'll come to you. We had a very interesting conversation last week, and this was always inevitable. So again, in the simplest term, perhaps another angle to this, what is this about, really?
Okay, thanks, Howdy. So let me just keep it simple. Devaluation is an intentional and deliberate government policy to lower the country's currency value relative to other currencies. Countries will use this downward adjustment of currency value to influence trade and, of course, to also stimulate a kind of economic growth. So you've seen it happen everywhere, particularly managed foreign exchange market countries. That's countries that manage their foreign exchange. You see it more prevalent in those places. Now you ask why has central bank decided to float the Naira? I think, if you move away from the controlled, managed, the incessant intervention, and all those sort of things that constrain the flows of funds, you begin to see the rationale behind this floating of the Naira. You float Naira to allow markets to determine the value of your currency rather than you as a country or as an institution trying to enforce it on the market. That is not how you enforce it on the market. The market will end up determining that value for you.
Yeah.
And when you don't allow the market to interact to determine that value, then you begin to see what we experienced in the troubled past, in the immediate troubled past, let me put it that way. That's the rationale. Let market determine the value of Naira.
Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. I think it's only fair to go to Sadiq now. Sadiq is Chief Dealer Financial Market at the CBN, joining us via Zoom from the nation's capital, Abuja. Sadiq, so there's been a lot of groundwork done, a lot of foundation laid by the gentlemen in the studio, and I'd like you to just take it up from there. But the perspective I want you to give us now is the perspective of the CBN. Because before this decision was made, I imagine there was a lot of thinking, a lot of back and forth, meetings, and the rest. So help Nigerians understand the thought process that went into the floating of the Naira. Again, we'll come to the terms and all of that, but the thought process, the pros and cons, what were the decisions that were considered before this one was made, Sadiq?
Okay, thank you very much, Kayode.
Yes, Sadiq, go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of things went through in deciding what's best for the economy, what's best for the country at the material point in time. Now, floating the exchange rate has always been the policy of the central bank. However, we've seen instances where we will have administrative controls here and there. And those administrative controls have a way of distorting the free float of the pricing, meaning it departs a bit from the fundamentals, the economic fundamentals. Now, Kayode, if you look at the country in the last 1, 2, 3 years, you would see the level of the reserve that the central bank was holding. We've seen the reduction, the decline in the reserves. We've seen the pressure around demand. We've seen the reduction in FX supply coming into the country. All this put together says a lot about the confidence that is in the economy. Now, the interplay between these forces will now depends on what you actually want to do. So the floating rate naturally is to address some of those distortions that were created by probably arbitrarily holding a rate at a position that was not supported by fundamentals. We've seen reversal of capital. We've seen loss of investor confidence. Not only investor confidence, Nigerians were losing confidence on the currency and they were holding a foreign currency. Now, to reverse all that, you would want to go to a rate that reflects what the fundamentals are. Now, a departure from that destination or that position of what the destination of the currency is led to all those things. Now, in order to correct that and to for so many other purposes, reasons, including the stability of our trade balance, the restrictions that were prevalent at that time, the efficiency, market efficiency, we have all this as factors that were considered for rolling a floating exchange rate regime. So in June 2023, we've seen a unification of the market, and that was the beginning of the new era of flotation of the currency. I'll pause here, Kayode, and we'll respond further as the questions comes up.
Well, thank you very much, Sadiq. There's a quick follow-up. I want you to speak to that, and that's for the Nigerian listening there. Who remembers when the dollar to naira was less than 1,000 naira, and when people now see that the dollar to naira is over 1,000 naira, and they hear you say, "Well, this is for the good," they keep wondering, what does good look like? Because for them, good looks like it should even drop to like 100 and go back to 150 naira. To the dollar. So help them understand what good looks like and this process so we can contextualize this good that you mean, Sadiq, quickly.
Yeah, so Kayode, that's the desired destination. We'll get there, hopefully. But what is very key is to understand what do we need? Do we need a cheap exchange rate? So it all depends on the stance of the country, the economic policy the country is trying to adopt. Now, the job of the central bank happens to be a very difficult one in the sense that it needs to find the balance between where the currency should be. Now, I gave an example the last time, and typical of that is if your currency becomes cheap, what that means is you're promoting your exports, you're promoting outflows, inflows, because it's cheaper to get your currency. So it's and then whatever you look at, the way you look at the other side now, assuming you're moving the price of the exchange rate of the dollar, and you want the exchange rate to come back to either 800 or 1,000. So Nigerians will immediately feel the relief. There will be probably reduction in cost of goods and services, because these are all unimported items. On the other side, we're going to lose the investments that some other Nigerians have made to substitute those import items. Now, those substitutions happen because it now becomes cheaper to produce locally than to import. Why? Simply because of the exchange rate. The moment you adjust, the exchange rate goes lower than the desired position. What that means is it now becomes cheaper for Nigerians to buy those things abroad rather than patronizing the locally produced ones. Those investments, the confidence that those investors have gathered in the cost of the policy will be deteriorated. So Kayode, simply put, the balance between the price is very key. Nigerians should understand at every point in time there's a trade-off. And what the central bank and government is doing is trying to find that balance that will give a price enough to also stimulate the economic objective of the country and not to be counterproductive at the same time. As you grow your base, you can have a better exchange rate, and other policies will also work together to support it.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. Let me come back to the studio now and get the thoughts of the gentleman in the studio. And he's talked about some of the benefits, and I want us to drill deeper. So there's the, in photography, there's something they call pixel, and there's a big picture. So pixel is the picture element, the tiny dots you get, and then there's the big picture. For a lot of people, we see the pixel, we see our own picture with things are tough for me because of the devaluation of the floating of the naira. But he's speaking to the big picture. So maybe we try to balance that. And I'll start with Ron yet again. Ronald, I'm giving you a nickname all of a sudden. I know, right? So Ronald, let's talk about the big picture and also acknowledge the pixel, the experience of Nigerians, for the big picture of the CBN and the government is trying to achieve with the flotation of the naira.
Okay. All right, let me go back to the fundamentals. Quickly, before I do that, it's Coronation Merchant Bank.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Let's start with what the two money is supposed to do. There are two major functions. There's a third one, but relevant to this discussion, two major functions. Money is supposed to reflect value. Okay, it's supposed to be a common measure of value within an economy. All right, and then number two is that money is supposed to be a store of value over time. The third function is money is a common medium of exchange. So in Nigeria, global Nigeria, naira is used as a medium of exchange. So the value naira is a measure of the value of the Nigerian economy. Now, it did not float the naira. Floating means that the currency is determined by the demand and supply activity within that economy. So the fundamental function of naira is only achieved when it's floated. It therefore reflects the functions of the economy. Now, the problem of the naira is the problem of the Nigerian economy. If we want a fixed naira, then investors, both domestic and foreign, would not see the naira playing its function, its fundamental function of being both a store of value and a measure of value of the economy. When you float, you give the naira back those two key functions. Now, you listen to Sadiq. Sadiq mentioned the problem of attracting capital. Okay, so for an economy to strive, the fundamentals of production or the factors of production must work in harmony. So there's land, there's labor, there's capital, and there's entrepreneurship. Now, capital in a fixed pegged economy to be difficult to attract capital.
Right.
Because the capital believes that your naira is not reflecting the economic realities. Okay. Then also what we now saw happen during the bad old days was exporters that earn dollars refused to bring the dollars back into the economy because they felt that they're not going to get the appropriate value of the naira upon return.
So we're wearing makeup for naira. Heavy
Yeah,
makeup. We didn't know what that naira really looked like.
Yes, it wasn't playing its core functions.
Interesting. Fantastic. I love the way you put that. So I hope you listening out there, you're getting a sense of some of the inner workings of the economy. And I appreciate that a lot of people are going through, they're experiencing this firsthand. But it's always good to have a balance, understand why some of these decisions are being made, what the goal is, so we can all key into it. And you said something very important, Ronald, that the naira is meant to, it's a reflection of our economy. So at the end of the day, we are sort of responsible for where the naira is in some sense. There is a job of the regulator, but there's also the demand and supply bit. And who is the person demanding, who's supplying? Basically Nigerians. So I'm going to come to Bankole on this as well. We can talk about what the CBN is doing or has been doing, because 2023 to now, it's almost 2 years, right? And a lot of people want to know what is being done, right, to ensure that the effect of this is not too harsh on the Nigerian economy. And we know how fragile the economy can be sometimes. But maybe you might want to speak to the big picture as well. And we'll talk to some of those policies that the financial sector has been able to put in place to reduce the impact.
Okay, I will quickly speak to some points.
Yeah.
The central bank has put in a lot of work to ensure transparency in the market. As recently as December 2nd, we launched trading FX on Bloomberg BMatch system. That had been in the making.
We're going to explain that properly, but go on.
That had been in the making.
Yeah, so keep, if you're listening, keep that Bloomberg
BMatch system.
BMatch system of physical.
There used to be various platforms.
Yeah.
Where, you could buy from central bank. There was BDC selling, and there was interbank. Right now, there's just one source, major source, where suppliers meet with the demand, and we have achieved uniformity in rate, stability. So the central bank had put in some reforms as a step. We have achieved stability in rate around 1.5. There was a time where in this country we had about 4 different rates, and you could not plan with that.
Right.
That affected predictability in the market. And right now, as we speak, for those who are far from the bank or retail end, the central bank has also allowed the BDC to come into the circle. So
there's a slight difference in those rates.
Very, very minimal, just 1% away from 1 naira, 1% away from the rate at which it's traded at the interbank. But the plan is to ensure that those in the markets get access. So they have ensured liquidity also, availability. We do not have the scarcities that we used to have 24 months ago.
You called it the bad old days. But I know the good old days, but now I hear it's the bad old days.
Those are the results of what they've done. Sadiq and his team, they've made available funds by way of liquidity, stabilizing the rate, and then ensuring that there's uniformity. It's a very transparent market now because regulation has kicked in big time. And even as we speak, BDCs I've mentioned that before, that BDCs are being brought back because, of course, there's the market part of, I want to talk of the Aspanda, Alaba, and all those. So they need some retail amounts quickly, so we can sell to them through
you can retail to them.
Asfama is the association.
As from the market.
Is Alaba.
Yeah, that area.
Okay. Good.
So
Just in case someone is listening and wondering what I know they sell in Alaba is different.
We're trying to make the discussion
simple, yeah,
and empirical. So those guys, rather than queuing at the banks or going through very long processes, can really get the retail source to the BDCs. So, and that's very inclusive.
So you're saying essentially there's some sort of better structure
around the market right now. Inclusivity is what I've just spoken about.
Yeah.
The stability in the rate you can plan, because now we have one single rate, and the source of trading right now is just the Bloomberg B match system, which was launched in December 2nd last year. So it was just a step into harmonization that the central bank did, and I mean, the market is glad, the market is liquid, the market is transparent.
There you go.
That's very.
There you go. I can tell you, I'll come to you naturally. We'll also get to how people can access the very much needed Forex when we return from the break. But I just want you to add to this. We're due for a break in about a minute or two, but just add to some of the points being made. The big picture, again, I think we can keep talking about this because it's important to help people see that big picture. So,
yeah, thanks very much. So I think, I mean, just not to repeat what the other speakers have said, I'm a very optimistic person. I've been in this market for a while. We know what it was, and we can see what it is now. And if you recall, in my last week engagement, I said, I am seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Now, the truth is, we are seeing the clear departure from where we were. I can tell you that where I work, we deal in big sum of money that you can't imagine this some few months or years back.
It was chaotic.
You know, so for me, yes, it may not have trickled to the average man on the streets, but I've always believed that there is no gains without some level of pains. You can have some benefit without some cost, coming in. I think that's the phase, and we are gradually moving away from there, and the reality is beginning to get done. Just like he said, the market is more transparent now. You can see the confidence returning to the market. You can see integrity. I think all these, with little time, the man on the street will begin to see it. As the Naira begin to get its true value, everybody will begin to see how it was. Where we were was around 1617 at some point. If we look at the other market, it's even crossing beyond that. But today, there is a clear convergence as we speak now. And this is just coming from a system introduced just 2nd of December, which has promoted all this. So I think we just need to be a bit patient. We'll all feel it the way it is. But from where we sit, we do see something that is much better than where we were in the past. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're due for a break now, a quick break. But when we return, we're going to talk about this devaluation versus depreciation matter. Because some people say, no, it's depreciation. Some say, no, it's devaluation. Some say it's floating. So it's important to understand, these terms. And we'll talk about that. Also talk about where people can get access, because it's important to also point them in the right direction. It looks like there's a lot of information these days, and that's why we have this show to fact check these issues and present people with the right information. By the way, you can be a part of the show if you're listening to us. Head over to WhatsApp 0916-257-1214. That's on WhatsApp 0700 7000 977 or 0901 133 9791. We're due for a break now. I see the calls are coming in. I promise to take those calls when we return. This is still the Financial Literacy and Public Enlightenment radio show brought to you by the Bankers Committee. Stay with us.
$50 wahala now, wow! Everything just dey expensive.
Oh, that's the call sound.
Na true.
Sorry.
My friend. See, your shoe, your shirt na from Dubai, your phone na from China, your car na from Japan. In fact, everything wey dey your body so na import dem order. How that one take sign on? If price of dollar go come down, you get
Sorry, of course, somewhere.
we suppose to export pass how we dey import. Number two, we suppose to buy more than Nigeria. support local business.
It
And
was
number
even the
four,
one I
if
was
you
looking
want
at.
send dollar and other foreign currency enter Nigeria, make we dey use international monetary agents. Makes it so. Oh, country people, make we join hands reduce the pressure on our naira,
So
grow
I would
our
like you to
export
use the
market,
mic
and
very.
increase
I was
forex
trying to
inflow.
pick to
Now,
flow.
our hand
I
is
think
there.
maybe if I've
This
got this sign that
Yours is even better than. Yes. Just talk to the mic. That's where the transmission begins. Talk to the mic. Yeah, okay.
I want collect those.
As
Why? I know one waiting happen for 16,
Just
17.
drop.
Get to the end. I must collect correct naira note for hand.
Casey, cash dey everywhere. For bank, ATM, POS agent, and if you want run and cash this, mobile app, internet banking, ATM, POS, USSD, QR code, and other options them. You sure? Beg, make we dey go. No customers dey up, they wait for you. See, the cash wey you dey find for Sokoto, e dey for your Sokoto.
John the Baptist, Ambassador Leia,
Country people, money,
exactly. I can see. I can see Mohammed. So this is the
2 minutes before we started, but he went up.
Well, welcome back to the Financial Literacy and Public Enlightenment Radio Show, brought to you by the Bankers Committee. What an interesting conversation we've been having about the floating of the naira, the thinking behind it, what this means, some of the policies being put in place to reduce the impact and ensure that the naira finds its value. I understand it in a very simple way. Prior to this point, naira has been wearing plenty makeup, heavy makeup. You know how okay, I don't want to get in trouble with the women today, but basically that's my understanding of what the naira was. So now we know what the naira really looks like. We appreciate the naira for its, its peculiarities, its beauty, and eventually we'll be able to get that appropriate value for our naira. We still have with us on the show Chief Dealer Financial Markets at the Central Bank of Nigeria, Sadiq Ahmed, joins us from Abuja virtually, and right here in the studio we have Ronald Nwa who's the head Global Market Treasury Coronation Merchant Bank. And next to him is Bankole Odusoya, Chief Dealer Polaris Bank. And of course, Akintoye Babalola, Treasurer Fidelity Bank, also here in the studio. We're expecting the ED Global Markets and International Banking Division, FSH Merchant Bank, Hakim Mohammed, to also be a part of the conversation. Gentlemen, thank you so much. And before we went on that break, by the way, we'll be taking your calls very soon. The number to call us on is 0916-257-1214 or 0700-7000-977. You can send us an SMS, by the way, on 0901-133-9791. I'll take those numbers again, all right? If you want to WhatsApp us or call us, these are the numbers to use: 0916-257-1214 or 0700-7000-977. If you want to do SMS, if you're a bit old school like me, the number to use is 0901-133-9791. So let's get back to the conversation. Sadiq, I'm coming to you right away. And before we took that break, I raised that debate, depreciation versus devaluation. And somewhere in between, floating comes in. What exactly are we experiencing right now in Nigeria? What decision was made by the central bank? Was it depreciation, devaluation? Sadiq, help us out, please.
Okay, Kaide, I think first and foremost is just to understand, in the initial conversation, there was an effort to define what devaluation is, which also can have the same outcome with depreciation. So, but I think the clear difference between these two is while devaluation is the reduction in the official exchange rates of a country relative to another currency, is usually done by a deliberate action of the central bank. Now, devaluation mostly happen in a system that has a fixed or somewhat fixed policy. The other part, unlike depreciation, it occurs due to market forces, as it was rightly mentioned. So one part, market forces could lead to a reduction in the value of the currency. On the other part, a deliberate policy pronouncement or action can also happen to change or reduce the value of the currency. So Kayode, these are the two issues. Now coming to your question around what happened, whether the currency was actually devalued or it depreciated. My answer to that would be in 2023, there was a policy change. That policy was not a devaluation policy. It was a correction of a policy from a controlled regime to a freely floating regime. Now, what we saw was because there was a policy shift, distortions that were prevalent in the market were all collapsed. All various prices that were present in that market at that time were all unified. So all other markets were dismantled, the structures were dismantled, and there's an organized and true structured market that was created. So what we saw was actually a depreciation, a rapid depreciation of the currency that led to something that looks like a devaluation. So yes, there was a currency, the currency has devalued, but technically it was a force that moved the rate from where it was to where it became at that time. Now, if you remember, prior to the policy of the central bank, people were already used to 800 and 700 thereabout. So that was a price that was known to many. I cannot recall Nigerians were actually pricing their products or goods at 400, even at that time. The price to reference, even at that time, was the parallel market rate, which was doing 800 anyway. So it was actually the official exchange rate that was 400, but every other rate is above 400. That explains the distortion around. And of course, if you look at it, the currency is where your inflow and outflow meets. There must be an equilibrium. If that equilibrium is distorted, there will be a disparity and distortion across different segments of the market. So Kayode, it wasn't a devaluation, it was a depreciation that happened as a result of the policy shift of the central bank, which was not targeted at devaluation, but as a consequence of the policy, the currency was corrected. It got to that level where probably the fundamentals where it should be, and then the correction would start. From there, the fundamentals are setting in, and that is where you will be able to apply policies, and then it will begin to see the appreciation. And I'm happy to hear that the market is also acknowledging that, yes, we're beginning to see this reversal. We got to at high at 1.7 at some point. Now we're seeing the reversal. And then this is not going to be as quickly as probably the market would want it to be.
Okay, Sadiq.
It will be a gradual thing, and then we're heading there.
All right. So there you have it, an explainer, really.
What was intended was a depreciation, but as an effect, now I'm talking like a banker now. That's what you get for sitting with bankers all day. What we then got was devaluation, but the goal is then appreciation. Gentlemen, how am I doing? Do I resume tomorrow? All right. Well, absolutely. I mean, this is the banking sector. We've had joining us now on the show, as I said earlier, on Hakeem Mohammed, who's the ED Global Markets and International Banking Division at FSDH Merchant Bank. Hakeem, You're welcome to the show. It's good to have you on.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Kayode. Can you hear me?
Oh, absolutely, Akim. I can hear you loud
Okay.
and clear. And I wonder where you want to come into this conversation. I know you've been following from the very scratch. We've tried to explain what this depreciation, which turned out to be devaluation, is all about. Talked about some of the policies of the central bank to mitigate the impact. We've talked about the big picture of when we try to define or differentiate between depreciation and devaluation. I know that there's a talk about where can people then access this much needed forex. There are people, for example, who want BTA, PTA, they want it for medical reasons, school fees. Perhaps you can come in there because I think it was Akintoye that made reference to the Bloomberg B-Match system, right? So I want you to tell people now where to go to if you want that much needed forex for these reasons now.
I think, perhaps one of the good things that have happened to maybe to us as a country in the last few months was the introduction of BMatch. Before BMatch, there's usually an issue. It's typically an issue trying to get FX, sort of central bank had to intervene. I was a major supplier of FX in the market. But with BMatch that was launched on 2nd of December, we've seen liquidity improve. We've seen increased transparency. Because again, it's all open there. It's an order-based platform where people go in there, put in a rate that sort of says, oh, this is where I'm happy to buy at, and this is where I'm willing to sell at. And it's very transparent. Both parties can see, what is going on there. But to answer your question specifically around, where can people go to? It's still your banks. Just pick up your phone or walk into your banking hall, and obviously there are some forms that need to be filled. There are some things that need to be done. Once you've completed all of those forms, then the liquidity, which was an issue before, maybe the currency was floated. All of that is gone away now. You typically would be able to buy PTA up to $4,000, BTA $5,000. There is also the limit around school fees, 15,000 per period. And the liquidity is there. So it's just a function of whether you want to buy or you're one of those who say, oh, I want to only buy at a specific price. But even if that is it, your order will be placed on that platform and your order will be filled. So it's now a function of whether you're ready to buy or not. So gone are the days where, for example, you wanted to pay for school fees and you had to queue up in the banking or for days or even weeks before it gets sold. Now that the currency has been floated, the exchange rates are sort of quite similar, both what you find in the official market and in the alternative market. Orders are being filled quicker, I would say. So to answer maybe your question directly, just go to your bank and present all the paperwork, that will be required for you to be able to buy FX for this purpose.
Fantastic. So same way you approach your bank for other things, you can just head over to the bank. If you need forex for, by the way, in case you're wondering, what is BTA? What is PTA? BTA is Business Travel Allowance, right? PTA is not Parent Teachers Association, at least in this sense. It is Personal Travel Allowance. So if you need forex for either business or personal travel, that's why we say BTA for business and PTA for personal. You can walk to your bank, whatever bank you use. And that's why we have the banks represented right here. So this is not me saying it. This is the banks saying it. Am I correct, gentlemen?
Yes.
By the way, they said I'm correct, just in case you're wondering. But let's forge ahead, gentlemen. And I think this is really important to set the records clear. But there are those who would say, I don't quite trust this. You say one thing on radio now, and I'll get to bank. It will be another thing entirely. So maybe we can just walk them through the process, right? What do you do when you get to your bank? Who do you approach? What is the process? How long does it take? So we can help them envision this, because the goal is to ensure that everybody is on the same page on this one. And naturally, I'll come to you, Bankole. What is that process? So you go to your bank, you fill a form, you submit the form, just maybe a simple explainer of the process so people know that indeed you can approach your banks with these things.
Okay, I'll just take three of those PTA, BTA, and school fees.
Yeah.
For PTA, to be eligible, it has to be a flight. You're traveling to somewhere that is 5 hours away from Nigeria. That's number one.
So no show if I'm going to Ghana.
No.
What if I'm going by road and it's 10 hours?
No, that's not right. So your travel document.
Right.
And then usually the standard amount you would get is about $4,000. In the thick of the scarcity that we had in 2003, I mean, from 2016 to 2003, the amounts were, rationed.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm sure the market is liquid enough.
You can get as much as 4,000.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
For personal travel allowance, also you need some tax, except if you are retired. You need tax ID and your travel document.
Yeah. So you heard that.
Yeah,
first
$4,000 quarterly.
There you go.
It's
just
not,
in case you're wondering.
It's not monthly.
People are like, oh, well, they've calculated it.
Yes,
But go ahead.
For school fees, you need your school invoice, and then the student's passport data and all that. So that's also limited to about, I think, for 2 times, I think it's about $15,000. That may have changed, but it was around that limit. But the market is liquid now. There are no restrictions as to rationing. Very liquid market. And price is the price guide. I'm giving a guide. It's around 1.5.
Yeah.
But the alternative market is just about 1.6, not far away from 1.5. So the emphasis right now is on the interbank, where most trades are going on the interbank because it's transparent, very liquid, and you can plan with it. I'm giving you, all year you're going to find FX at the interbank at around 1.5.
Wow. And I think this has been one of the major issues, particularly for businesses, investors.
You can plan around this.
Exactly. Because at some point it was very, very volatile. Oh, yeah. You step in and you're burned and you're like, I'm not doing it again. And I think this is one of the things we can actually commend about this whole policy. I want us to get some broader context to this conversation, because we've talked about Nigeria quite a lot. But do we have other countries maybe that have tried this, that have gone this route, and how well did they fare? Because we can learn from our forebearers in that sense. And you might want to take that up yet again. Do we have other countries that we can learn from and say, okay, they did it, it worked, or it didn't work, this is how we can make it better?
Okay, just to quickly touch on what Sadiq spoke on earlier about depreciation and
devaluation. Yeah.
Devaluation happens in a fixed FX rate regime where you devalue deliberately. The depreciation happens where there's a gradual, move based on demand and supply in a flexible FX rate regime. We had seen where, now I'm speaking to your question,
the other countries
where devaluation happened in Laos, and the producers of rice preferred to sell to China for FX. So that led to scarcity of rice in Laos and became a crisis. So I'm saying that to exporters, devaluation is good. It's not always bad. Yes, devaluation is good for exporters because it makes their product attractive and cheaper.
All right.
Because for $1 that used to come into Nigeria, you could buy stuff that was 700 naira. But for $1 now, you can buy stuff that is about 1.5. You can buy more. So for the exporter, it pays. He also fetches more by way of proceeds. Export proceeds increases. So, but the disadvantage on the other side is that it could lead to scarcity of locally produced goods.
Because they just come for everything, like, give us in bulk.
Laos was a good case, study where they preferred to sell all their produced rice to China rather than locally for FX exchange.
I like that. And I know this is beyond the context and the scope of this conversation, but I think that's another reason for us then as Nigerians to take advantage of this, begin to look for opportunities as businesses to be able to export, because what that means is that there should be increased demand for whatever it is we're doing. We have the manpower. If we're judging by our census, is the projections, we're over 200 million, right? So that's a lot of people that are able to engage in work that we can export and make some more money. We're beginning to wind down, but I'll try to take a few questions and calls as much as we can. Don't forget, 0916-257-1214 is the number to call. 0700 as well. 0700 7000 977. That's 070 070 00977. or SMS 0901 133 9791. I'm going to try to take as much questions as I can, but I want us to wind down on this point, gentlemen, and I'm coming to you now, Akintoye, then I'll come to Ronald. What does the future look like? Because we talked about certainty, right? Being able to plan, but what does the future really look like for people who are like, well, we've gone down this road before, or we're well familiar with this. This thing happens 2 years or 1 year, 6 months down the line, things change. So for you, having been in this sector for a long time, what does the future look like? Wow, begin with you, Akintoye, and I'll come to Ronald.
Okay, thanks. So for me,
and you may want to speak to any of the points that he made earlier on, but
yeah, well, I could just share after this talk. So for me, like I said, I'm a bit optimistic. If you look at the way the policymakers are pushing now, the discipline, the confidence, and the clarity of, vision and intention, it will give you some level of thoughts that you can comfort, or you can get comforted in this in terms of understanding and trusting what they are doing. Now, you will see the quest to have the market vibrant, deepen it, and to create liquidity, which is what we've been seeing, so far so good, at least from what we have seen up to now. Now, projecting into the future, and I think I also mentioned this in my last discussion, with the level of intention that the central bank is running this implementation, I think we can say that the future is bright. It's coming on very well. It's begin to see, like I said earlier as well,
light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, we begin to see better things, coming from here, because discipline is key.
Yeah,
you can say yes. You can see that discipline. Deliberate, intention.
All right.
We can clearly see it as well. Now, going by countries that have done vision before, there are quite a number of countries that have done it. Usually, every country has their own different experiences.
Yeah.
It depends on who is what. We know about the Mexico peso crisis in 1994. Even in the 1920s, the Germans, even in the 1949 or thereabout, you see the UK devaluing against the currencies and all that. I mean, against the currency, the US currency,
the dollar,
the dollars precisely. And even in the Asian tigers, we had those crises in 1997. So quite a number of these, but like I said, everybody has their different impacts, because sometimes devaluation could be self-defeating too, depending on implementation, depending on the structure and the discipline that you put into it. But for us, when you identify what it is for the regulators to ensure that they follow it to the latter and they work it to conclusion.
And that's what we expect naturally. Gentlemen, we have to wind down in 3 minutes or less, and I want 30 seconds each. Ronald, your final thoughts on this. This is clearly not the end of the conversation, but final thoughts on this as we begin to look into the future.
Okay, so like I keep saying, it's about the economy.
Yeah.
All right. So in politics, they say, is the economy stupid? So in that context, what the central bank has done is the financial market side, which they keep saying is monetary policy.
Yeah.
So the CBN has brought in a lot of decency and determination. Okay, so transparency with the FX code that's been introduced, and ethics, governance, and market risk analysis, and the rest. And then also the CBN has ensured that there's a store of value for the Naira. So interest rates were increased so that the Naira can counter the impact of inflation. Okay. Then ultimately on the fiscal side, work is being done to ensure that the land factor of production is secured. So improvement in security across the nation will improve the land use.
All right.
Labor, our populace is better educated. We want to retain talent within Nigeria. There's a lot of competition for Nigerian talent by the foreign market.
Okay, Ronald. We're out of time. I know this is a
Alright.
topic that you're very, very vested in, and that's understandable, but we have to anchor at this point. Perhaps we'll let Hakeem take the final words on this. Sadiq will always be with us, but Hakeem, final thoughts. Just one sentence, your final thoughts on this.
Okay, I think the future is bright. Quite a number of the things that Central Bank has done around implementation of FX code and co are seeing improvements in is expected to increase the confidence of the public. And I also think that some of the things they've done around keeping yields where they are now sort of started to encourage local savers, and people local Nigerians are looking away from FX, because in the past people will let me buy FX because I know that there's value there. All of that may no longer be necessary. We've also seen the cleanup that they've done around generally FX allocation and all of that. And all of that are expected to continue to to show to support the currency going into the future. So I would say the future is bright based on all of this thing that the central bank has done, and with players like ourselves supporting the central bank. I believe that gone are the days when you're looking to buy FX and you're queuing up for months to be able to get it filled.
Thank you so much, Hakeem. We have to anchor at this point. Clearly not the end of the conversation, as I said. Sadiq Ahmed, Chief Dealer Financial Markets, CBN, thank you so much. By the way, you can tell a lot about the regulator from the way the regulated are speaking. And to a large extent, you can hear from the banks themselves, lending credence to what the CBN is doing. So thank you so much for your time, Sadiq Ahmed. We've also had Akintoye Babalola, Treasurer, Fidelity Bank. Hakeem spoke earlier on via Zoom, is the ED, Global Markets and International Banking Division, FSDH Merchant Bank. Bankole Odusoya, thank you so much for your time as well. Chief Dealer, Polaris Bank. And Ronald Nwaiziapu, Head Global Market Treasury, Coronation Merchant Bank. Gentlemen, thank you so much. This is not the end of this series. We're back next week. You remember all of the talk about how it is now easy to purchase things in Nigeria based on the FX. We're going to be telling you how we can boost our FX inflow. So you do not want to miss the conversation next week. On behalf of the production team, the engineers, Olatunde Abdul Lateef, Daniel Koye, the studio manager, Idowu Rotimi, the assistant producer, Lei Adigboye, the producer, Maria Iwoma, and of course, director, Lagos Operations, Bolanle Oyemi. We have to thank you so much for being a part of the show. And of course, Samuel Adebayo is on the camera. My name is Kaido Kikiolu. Don't forget, till next time, keep making progress.